Welcome back to another packed Blue Light Comms webinar. And really, today's session couldn't come soon enough because we're diving into a topic that affects every community, water safety. This is an area of huge public interest and, frankly, a real opportunity to save lives. Just in the last week of May, 20 people have drowned, 14 of them children in the UK. Which is devastating numbers and underline exactly why we're here. So better, more targeted communication about risks and what to do in an emergency genuinely reduces harm. And it's something we all care about and something that we could probably do better at. Even the WHO classifies drowning as a preventable public health issue. So probably fair to say there's more we can do. The good news is we've got a brilliant lineup now to cover a lot of ground. So in the spirit of acting quickly and decisively, we're going to move through each speaker at pace and then leave plenty of time at the end for your questions and discussions. So you'll be hearing from Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service and the Fire Pro Chair, the RNLI, RoSPA, the Coastal Navigators Network, from CAN ourselves, and we'll wrap up with James from Turn the Page. So please, Jack, hand over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, good, not morning, good afternoon. I'd normally say happy Friday, but I won't because it's quite a sad topic really. And obviously Martin's just talked there about 20 deaths, so this is quite a serious and somber thing. But I guess firstly, just thank you, JP, for asking me to speak, and yourself, James, and the Blue Light Hub for pulling this together quite last minute. I think it's important, and that's reflected in how many people are on the call already and still coming in. Introduction to me, I'm Jack. I'm the Senior Communications Manager at Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue, and I'm also Chair of Fire Pro, and that's the network for fire service comms people around the country. Am I a water safety expert? I wouldn't say so. But I have worked in this area for quite a while, quite passionate about it, and I know a lot of people on the call are as well. I think it's already been said. Actually, it's an issue that's increasingly becoming bigger and bigger, and it's probably hit hard over the last few weeks. I know personally, I was reflecting after I've been asked to speak. I think I'd need an extra hand to count the water deaths I've worked on over the last 10 years, and that is really, really sad. We've had one recently in Nottinghamshire, so one of them 20, and that was a young man who was kind of swimming in water with his friend, having a few drinks. Unfortunately, got into trouble. Firefighters did save him. They did try and give him CPR, and he did go to hospital, but unfortunately, he didn't make it. So that's just one example of what's been going on over the last few weeks. I know it's horrible for anyone that's had to deal with it. I think from a fire and rescue perspective, being slightly selfish initially, there's lots of agencies on the call. Water safety is quite a complex thing. Before we even talk about the messaging around it and what leads to these incidents, I think as fire and rescue services, it's not something we necessarily have a really clear 3-line statutory duty to work on. We don't have necessarily dedicated funding, but we do a lot of work around it, work alongside other agencies. Obviously, firefighters respond to water incidents regularly. And I know a lot, if not all, fire services work quite hard on water safety campaigning and initiatives, and that's supported by the National Fire Chiefs Council as well, who sort of oversees our organisations. So it's an area that, whether or not there's that really clear directive, we do work on and we work hard on. But that is a challenge. I think not having that really clear area of focus and directive around it is an issue. Other agencies maybe feel the same. I think there are lots of agencies all very passionate about water safety, but we don't always know sort of nationally who is that really lead agency who leads the charge. I think that probably is one of the challenges we have with water safety as a whole. All the challenges I've mentioned, the incidents that we've had in the last few weeks, every single one is going to have its own context. So I don't want to stereotype. I don't know all the details, but I think there's a fairly clear theme that I've seen in my career, which is if you take school holidays, add in some hot weather, and you're going to start seeing incident spikes. Not just water, but that's what this is about today. But that's an issue, because I think when hot water comes and kids are off school, it's very, very hard to stop what, just crowds and crowds of people sometimes flock into lakes or quarries, wherever it may be, and jumping in. I think in their mind, the behaviour isn't particularly risky. If people have done the 50-metre swimming badge, they may think, okay, I'm all right to do this. People don't fully understand the concept of cold water shock, don't understand the idea of hidden currents, or just generally swimming after a few drinks and how that can impact you. A lot of the incidents are inland, and that's another challenge I don't think I've really spoke to people about a lot, or heard spoke about a lot. But I've spent several holidays on the south coast of England, and the attitude towards water safety on the beach in Cornwall, for example, does seem very different to the attitude you might see where I work locally, whether that be I've worked in South Yorkshire, I work in Nottinghamshire now, I've lived in Derbyshire. I think, the attitude on beaches in places where there are lifeguards there, where there's flags, better education in that sense, because people live near the water, is very different to those who don't see water a lot and who may go to a quarry, disused quarry, etc. So that makes it quite a complex world and a very complex message, really. I think that's an issue. I've not ashamed to say I've previously fallen foul of some disgruntled open water swimmers. I haven't appreciated some of the messaging I've used in my career, and I've learned and adjusted since then. But the reality is that's not our target audience. The audience in this case, in many cases, are people that aren't very well educated on water, don't do it safely, and sort of are doing it as a snap decision where the sun's out and it feels like a good idea. So I guess ultimately I'm trying to say the messaging is really complex. It's a complex area. Even behavioural science, the easiest thing to do is say just don't do it. Not easy. It doesn't necessarily work, because behavioural science and that kind of stuff tells us that could encourage people. Young people think rules are made to be broken. Not easy. That's very negative. It is a serious topic, and I don't want to finish on a negative note. But I think I've talked about having lots of different agencies working on this, not necessarily having that lead agency. You flip that round, and there's a lot of really passionate people in this call. Outside of this call, a lot of passionate agencies. The RNLI, RLSS, RoSPA, talked about the NFCC, all fire services I know, a lot work hard on water safety. I think, there's a lot of passion and energy and desire to do more around this, to do better, to try and save more lives. And I think, credit for putting this webinar on, credit for being involved in it. It's over 100 people. That's, really, really good. But I suppose it's a challenging space. The solutions aren't simple. But I guess what I'm saying is, hopefully, if everyone's able to work together on a campaign, multiple campaigns, establish some really clear messaging through this forum and outside of this forum, I think we can make more of a difference. And I'm sure with the support from the Blue Light Hub and everything, everyone on this call, it can go in the right direction. But unfortunately, I can't stay for the rest of the webinar. That's probably been the quickest introduction speech ever, but hopefully you get a lot out of it. I'm sure you will. It's a great team pulling it together. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I think if everyone does pull together, there's a lot of passionate agencies on this call who I'm sure can start to make a big, big difference.
Great, thanks, Jack. Should we hand over to the RNLI?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you very much. My name's Ross McLeod from the RNLI, and also hold a role of Deputy Chair of Water Safety England. So thank you to Jack for speaking before and opening. The NFCC are one of the many partners that are involved with the UK National Water Safety Forum. And a big thanks to everyone on this call that has done their bit over the last couple of weeks, which has been one of the most difficult few weeks for drowning in recent memory. In terms of that higher level action, I think topical, just to give you an update that in the next couple of weeks, the Royal Life Saving Society are promoting Drowning Prevention Week, and there is actually a debate in Parliament next week as well, with an MP from the South Coast who has put forward the topic of drowning prevention. So worth speaking to your local MPs where you can, to make sure that they're aware of that. That's on Tuesday next week. And I think there will be further kind of advocacy work going on up into the highest levels of government to ask around that coordinated response, particularly ahead of the next heat wave, but also the sort of lack of coordination across government departments at the moment is quite clear. So that's some interesting work that's going on at the forum level. However, the reason I'm here to speak to you today is around the RNLI's Float to Live campaign, which hopefully you can see on screen now. Sorry, I've lost my... bear with me. There we go. So as has been set up in the introduction, last week was a terrible week, and I think we're up to now over 18 people that have lost their lives, which really highlights the importance for urgent action, particularly ahead of upcoming good weather this summer. The Float to Live campaign is something that we've been running now since 2017. Hopefully a few of you on the call will have heard or seen about it before. Essentially, it's a campaign that's been developed from a lifetime's worth of research around cold water shock and in-water survival. So originally developed as a counter to the physiological response of cold water shock, which can cause you to gasp uncontrollably and panic in cold water. So this campaign was put together with support from the University of Portsmouth and lots of research through the line. But what we've seen in recent years is how applicable this advice to rest and relax in the water has been in lots of different situations. The advice itself is suitable for anyone, whilst when we started the campaign it was very much targeted at young men, primarily because they vastly overrepresent in the drowning data. What we've seen in that last 8 or 9 years is that lots of different people from walks of life, men and women, children and adults, and situations both inland and at the coast, have all found this advice really useful. So I take this that this advice is suitable for anyone that finds themselves in difficulty in the water. The advice itself is really simple, and again, I'd hope lots of people have seen this before, but it's all around encouraging people to rest and relax in the water, so to fight that natural instinct to thrash around and swim hard should you find yourself in cold open water. A couple of points of note: the tilt your head back with your ears submerged has come directly back through some research that we've run with the University of Portsmouth as a really useful anchor point for people to understand that if they're leaning far enough back in the water with their ears submerged, that will help bring their legs up. There's the obvious things about trying to encourage people to relax and control their breathing, move their arms and legs to help them float, and also focusing on that we all float in different ways. So the fact that if your legs sink, I've got what's scientifically known as heavy ankles. I think so my legs naturally sink, but that doesn't mean I can't float comfortably with a little bit of movement with my arms and my legs. And again, it's just re-emphasizing to people that floating doesn't have to look like that perfect starfish passive position floating on top of the water, because for many people that's just not realistic. Does it work as a campaign? So we've been running since 2017, and I would point you in the direction of the over 50 case studies we've had now of people that have heard or seen the message, have subsequently got into trouble in the real world, and have then contacted the RNLI proactively to say the Float to Live advice helped to save their life. And that's either staying calm enough, long enough to be rescued by lifeboats, lifeguards or other emergency services, or in some situations calming down enough to then self-rescue. And this young lad, Ewan, is our case study for this year, who survived after a surfing accident up in the northeast last year. And as I said, he's not alone. He's one of over 50 now. We've got Will and Kate there on the left-hand side, who are caught in a rip current. Ruth in the middle there was another surfing accident, and Aggie remembered the advice after seeing it on TV, and she fell into an inland canal. So again, just to emphasise, it's been useful in lots of different situations. If you want to know a little bit more about the background of the campaign, we've had a recently published peer review article in the British Medical Journal, which gives all the underpinning science and evidence, as well as how the RNLI has turned that into a successful public safety campaign. If you want to have a quick scan of that QR code, you're more than welcome, but I will put the link in the chat at the end of this and give you an opportunity to read up. The campaign itself for this year, just some of the headlines. I'm going to play the short campaign film just to familiarise you with the main kind of content.
Petai'ch yn mynd I drafferth mewn dŵr. Arnofiwch I fyw. Pwyswch eich pen yn ôl gyda'ch clistiau o dan y dŵr. Ymlaciwch a cheisiwch anadlu'n arferol. Symudiwch eich dwylo i'ch helpu I arnofio. Cofiwch, rannwch, arnofiwch I fyw.
Quite obviously that was the Welsh bilingual version, but we'd also have it in English as well, but just to make you aware that we do have the bilingual assets as well. We launched on the 19th of May with a really interesting event at the Wave Pool in Bristol, with a focus on getting the message through to Generation Z, because they do overrepresent in the drowning data. An example to show floating in waves as well. We had support from Jordan Wiley, MBE, who's a well-known explorer and TV presenter on The Hunted, as well as a different way of getting the message through to young people via social media. There is a British Sign Language version of the film available, and we've currently got a small paid campaign that's operating across multiple channels, including some specific work on TikTok and Twitch to try and reach those that are most at risk when it comes to some of those drowning deaths. And we are looking to put social media content out throughout the summer, including some influencer-led content like this one with Jacob Ward, which we put together last year, which he did pro bono for the RNLI, and is now the biggest, best performing organic post the RNLI has ever put out there, with tens of millions of viewers that have been promoted through Jacob's channel. And even just last week, one of our fairly standard posts around Float to Live has so far been shared 29,000 times and viewed over 5.5 million times on organic reach alone. So again, just emphasises well-timed, relevant content will definitely fly in these coming weeks. The media plan itself is also thermo-activated, so in response to hot weather, we're dialing things up. And I think from last week's example, we don't really need to go through the background, but we know that there are going to be more heat waves to come, and heat waves are very much here to stay. And work that we've done with partners through the Royal Life Saving Society and Bournemouth University show a really clear correlation between higher air temperatures and an increase in drowning deaths. The headlines from these three key studies is there is based on historic data, up to a 5-fold increase in accidental drowning risk during these 25-degree and above heat waves, with teenagers and young people relatively more likely to drown. Sadly, we saw that play out in real time last week, so really passionate to try and do more ahead of the next heat waves. How can you help? We have a toolkit, and we'll pop the link to that in the chat, which covers a lot of the content that I've already talked through today. There's some examples there from the RNLI of how some of these bits of the toolkit have been used out in the wild, through from posters in high dwell time locations such as toilet doors, through to activation and putting the stuff on social media as well. As you would expect in any standard toolkit, there's lots of social media resources with pre-written copy as well to help make things easier if you want to put content out that's already proven to work. We've got a different selection of assets using imagery that reflects people in different situations. So the all year round asset there is potentially more relevant for those of you at inland locations, showing someone that's fully dressed and maybe end up in the water accidentally. We've also
It's hot out there, but it's cold in here. Cold enough to take your breath away. If you get into difficulty in the water, remember, float to live.
So that's an example there of a slightly tailored version that we're going to be putting out there during heat waves that references the hot air temperatures but cold in the water. The final couple, I say we've got banners that are available in different languages. There's some physical assets that we can distribute if you've got any community run events with your community engagement teams, from little handouts to key rings. And we've got these big float mats here as well, which were designed for children, but work equally well for adults and firefighters alike. And that's a picture there from Dorset and Somerset Fire and Rescue that have been using these float mats at community events to help share the message. Looking further ahead, just two very brief things to mention. Mentioned already, Royal Life Saving Society have got a great drowning prevention week next week, so there will be lots of activity and online toolkits for that as well. Focus more on younger children, but would advocate that you get involved in that as well. And then on the 25th of July, we have World Drowning Prevention Day, which is a global awareness day, and the forum will be promoting the message around Find Your Float. And potentially we can come back at some point, JP, and give you a little bit more information on that when time allows. The final one is just to say this really does work, and I'll leave you with a text I got from a father of a young lad who remembered to float through seeing the advert in a cinema screening a few years back, and just a reminder of the human impact that allowed Simon to see his son Evan fall in love for the first time and graduate school with some amazing grades. Sadly, Evan's now fallen out of love with that girlfriend, but is back in a happy relationship with someone else, so all's well that ends well. Thank you very much. That's my contact details and a link to the British Medical Journal article.
Right. Thanks, Ross. I'm really pleased that campaign is so successful. And if I ever fall in cold water, I might have some Welsh language pop in the back of my brain.
Yeah.
Let me hand over to Georgie from RoSPA now, please.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping everyone can see my slides there.
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So yeah, from Ross covering what to do if you find yourself in trouble in the water, I'm going to speak a little bit about what to do if you see someone else in trouble in the water, with an introduction to a new campaign from Respect the Water called Phone, Float, Throw. This campaign launched earlier this year in April, but it has been several months in development, with input from all of the different organisations that you can see on the screen here, plus other stakeholders across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The campaign was developed between the National Water Safety Forum and Claremont Communications, and it sought to establish a language around bystander rescue that was going to be widely understood by the public, that was going to be memorable, and that would give the public actions of what to do if they saw someone in trouble in the water without putting themselves at risk. Obviously, we understand that if you see someone in trouble in the water, very natural response is to want to help, but we really don't want people to be entering the water themselves, as that puts themselves in danger, in addition to the person who's already in trouble. So the purpose of this campaign is to give them something proactive to do while staying safe on dry land. As part of the work that we did with stakeholders, we reviewed the language that we were using around bystander rescue. We'd been using a call, tell, throw message for several years at that point, but we wanted to make sure that that language was still applicable and well understood before we proceeded with developing any new campaign materials. And the results of that survey that we did with stakeholders demonstrated that actually the language, stakeholders didn't feel like it was well understood by the public. Throw, they felt, was the strongest of the terms, but call and tell could both be interpreted in different ways, might be quite ambiguous to people who weren't familiar with the phrase. So the main takeaway from that work that we did with stakeholders is that no one was particularly committed to this phrase, but they were committed to the actions that they represented, and they thought that the advice of what to do in that emergency situation was solid. We just needed a different way to communicate it with the public. Following that, we moved on to undertaking some public focus groups. We ran 2 focus groups, one with younger participants aged 18 to 29, and then another group with those aged 50 to 70. And again, we tested all of these terms that were in common usage at this point to see whether they were well understood by these groups. And as you can see on the screen there, both groups felt very strongly that it wasn't the best way to communicate these actions. Both call and tell weren't well understood by either group, but they felt that throw, as stakeholders did, was pretty straightforward to understand. And we tested this new terminology, phone, float, throw, with both groups, and it was met with agreement from both groups that this was a much better way to communicate those actions. So when developing the creative for our new campaign, this is the language that we wanted to move forward with. And we retested this with stakeholders as well, and it was met with pretty much universal approval across all of the different organisations that were involved in the campaign development. So having established the language we wanted to use, we then moved on to developing the campaign and creating these creative assets. We've decided to go with a image forward campaign, so using strong, striking imagery. We tested a few different creative concepts with the public, but this is the idea that emerged as being the most popular, focusing on the instructions without too much additional bump around it, so we're really getting to the point quickly. And by using this visually recognizable image of a life ring that's associated with water-based rescue, we're immediately getting across the point that these instructions are associated with rescuing someone who's in trouble in the water. And as you can see there, we've got these assets in both English and Welsh. In the campaign imagery, we expand on each of the 3 instructions and make sure that all the key information is right there in the image so that people don't have to go searching for additional information. We've created a campaign toolkit to allow stakeholders and partners, such as those on this call, to be able to share this campaign message across their channels and networks. This toolkit includes social media assets, it includes a digital sit sheet, and it includes posters as well that can be co-branded with your own logo. And then we also have a little animation that can be used on social media that just gives a little bit of extra detail on each of those actions, using the life ring as a sort of frame to show what each of them mean visually. I'll just let that play through before I move on. And these are the out-of-home assets. These are also available to download free from the Respect the Water website, and I will share a link to that in the chat once I've finished speaking. But as you can see on the left-hand side there, the posters can be co-branded with your logo so that they fit in with your established communication style. So how can different organisations get involved? Please do share the campaign across your channels and with your networks. We're working with CAN throughout the summer to on some paid media advertising to target groups such as young men through Snapchat, and also people who might find themselves near the water more regularly, dog walkers, cyclists, anglers who may find themselves in the situation of needing to perform a bystander rescue. But we are asking partners who do have channels and who do have access to promoting things to the public more broadly to please visit our website and download the free campaign materials and include them in your cycle of communications throughout the summer. And to please also use the language of phone float throw as the go-to message for bystander rescue moving forwards. That's all I have to share. I will pop a link to the website in the chat, and then I will also put my email address in there. So if you would like to access the full campaign toolkit after this call, please do drop me an email and I can send you a link to that. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Georgie. Another really clear and powerful campaign. Really good to see. I'm going to move over now to CNN and Sarah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Lovely to
Hi.
see you. And thank you to CAN for inviting me to speak to such a timely, important session. My name's Sarah Huff. I'm a programme manager working on a national programme called the Coastal Navigators Network, or CNN, which you might have heard of. But I'll briefly explain what the CNN is and the work that we're doing specifically with young people in coastal communities that ties into the work of CAN Digital and the RNLI, actually. So the CNN is a community of practice that was set up to give a greater voice to the coast and find practical solutions for a lot of the systemic challenges they face that were outlined in the CMO's report now over 5 years ago on coastal health. And we were set up initially with 6 coastal areas, looking at health inequalities and economic inactivity. And we're now working across 19 coastal locations. And we're collecting examples and learnings of what's working to turn the tide on a lot of the worrying trends that we're seeing in these areas, specifically around unemployment, health, social isolation, antisocial behaviour. And I'm sure, as many of you know, coasts do face various unique challenges. One of them being the half compass effect, so the fact that half of their area is obviously the sea. There's less that they can get access to. But also they do share very similar issues to inland neighbours. But being in a coastal area means that you have other things like very poor transport links, disparate services, fewer big employers. So a lot of the national trends we're seeing are being felt much more acutely in these small coastal towns that often don't necessarily have the resources or voice to advocate for themselves. So the CNN as a network, our objective is to kind of find these practical solutions and share them on a national scale, and then also advocate for kind of more sustainable funding and attention to be taken for these small coastal areas. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges in mind, but there are also some opportunities and assets coming into our coastal communities. So there tend to be areas with a great sense of pride and community. There is investment coming in around like nuclear, defence, ports, and of course, there's the physical and mental health benefits of being close to the sea. So we're eager to capitalise on those and help show particularly young people the benefits of growing up in these areas, particularly in light of recent reports around from The Guardian about youth mental health on the coast, and the Milburn report, that young people are really struggling at the moment. But there are opportunities for them, and we want to make sure that we're meeting those aspirations. Interestingly, from a water safety perspective, we have spoken to a lot of our sites, and young people, even though they live in coastal towns, may not have even gone to the beach, and often many of them can't swim or are really nervous of the water. And obviously really conscious of what that impact is on knowledge of water safety. So just an example of some of the work we've done recently, we hosted last month a young people summit for young people on the coast, where we had around 18 different young people from places like Blackpool, Whitehaven, the Isle of Sheppey, Torquay, all come along to Westminster to share their ideas and experiences of what it's like being a young person growing up in that kind of area. And we actually had CAN and RNLI host a table where they got to ask directly 3 young people what their ideas were on water safety and the engagement campaigns. And it was really valuable to hear about their ideas. They were incredibly passionate, very interested, and a lot of the things they said weren't necessarily ones you'd have thought of. So it's a reminder of how important it is to bring those people into the conversation, particularly as Ross said with the statistics of who these people are that are often getting themselves into trouble in the water. And I do believe that some of the ideas that came from that session have now been embedded into the Float to Live digital campaign with CAN. So a really good example of some of the practical things we're trying to embed into the network. And so, yeah, as a whole, the CNN is looking to make sure that coastal communities work for everyone. We're looking to build up a coastal youth forum now based on the momentum we had from the event last month. And we're really delighted to have CAN and RNLI as such active partners in the network to provide opportunities for young people, and also make sure that our coastal areas are a safer and happier place to live. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I'll pop my information in the chat. And yeah, thank you again for letting me speak.
Thank you, Sarah, and for putting that event on, which was so timely last week. And some of the things that we heard from young people, they were aware of the float message, but hadn't seen or could recall the Float to Live or the phone float throw campaign. So there was good work, we think, principally being done in schools, but there was very little awareness of this campaign and how to apply it. Some of the things that came out that we were really surprised at were the interest in signage. You know, they could see there was a lack of signage near places where young people went. They were perfectly open to having to being told what to do, ideally by trusted local figures like RNLI or teachers and people like that. They were very clear that often the bad behaviours are perpetrated by a small minority, and that they do not mind distancing themselves from those people. They did not feel peer pressure, as we might have suspected they would. Also, they didn't have a very clear idea of what social media was. Some said they didn't use social media, but they did use Snapchat. And one thing that really stood out for us was how much YouTube was used, how much they watched, and also, you know, it was shorts, but also long form video. So we are taking that and building it into the assets that we offer for those younger audiences. But they're very open, strong sense of fairness and of what the right thing to do is, and more than happy to be communicated with. And it looks like maybe there's a void there that we need to fill. Thank you, Sarah, for showing us there. I wanted to talk you through a little bit the campaigns that are active and how they're performing, and some of the things that you can do to support this campaign, how the public sector can use its channels. Sometimes people aren't aware of what they've got, how to understand your regional target audiences on this front, and looking at weather forecast triggering. So what do we do so that we're much better prepared next time the temperature spikes? This is the campaign running for RoSPA at the moment. It is targeting anglers, it's targeting walkers and runners, it's targeting young people in some areas, and what we're doing is bringing people to this landing page where people are asked questions about what they would do in that situation. The idea being to educate the audience that is most likely to be near the water. The reason for that strategy is the budgets with RNLI and with RoSPA are not sufficient to target everybody, which is why we need the public sector to use its channels to amplify. It is working well, but as you can see, only 4 million impressions so far, which is a very small proportion of the entire population. We asked our partners all over the public sector social media platform to look across all of the public sector channels for mentions of either campaign. They looked and found some mentions. Sentiment was sort of in the middle, but generally approving of sharing that message. So it's not a contentious message to share at all. The instances of support for the campaign were few and far between, less than 15% of accounts across the public sector had shared those messages consistently. So there's certainly some opportunity to use your own channels to amplify there. But social media isn't the only resource that you have. Often, as I say, public sector is the biggest media owner in the area, and you have, for example, email newsletters that have far larger viewership and opening rates than read the local newspaper online. There are also email triggered news alerts. So, for example, emergency alerts where around, for example, hot weather conditions, these messages could be delivered. And there is the opportunity as well to have planned nurture sequences, again, weather triggered to parents about how to have conversations with children about water safety and make sure they have the bystander message and the if you're in trouble in the water message. Also, councils and visit sites particularly have websites that have advertising on them, which we can use for free if we're given permission by you to do that. So giving us permission to run ads on your websites, in your e-newsletters, as well as you posting on organic social is really important. In many locations, transport and councils own the out-of-home space and are able to use some of that space for free. So when the weather conditions are right and the geography is right, using that space to place these messages in place. In the absence of signage, as the young people pointed to, these things will work as digital signage in those locations. And there is space as well for paid amplification to target specific audiences at key times to make sure that everybody in the area has actually seen the messaging. And we think that's an essential part of what we're doing. If you're on the eShop platform, they already have a float to live email nurture sequence ready to go in their library. They will have the phone float throw email nurture sequence ready to go, which you just need to ask your account manager to switch on there. Also, if you're on the eShop platform, advertising in e-newsletters, it's very easy to switch this on. So again, please let us know if you would like that to happen in your council or your fire or police service. It costs nothing, and it means that you can get lots and lots of free impressions out there and spread that message. Website advertising as well, something that can be provided for free. Putting ads on school term dates pages might be a really, really good idea, and potentially remarketing to those school term dates pages, making sure that message is in front of parents. Also, if you have fishing, running, walking content on your visit or on your council websites, again, making sure that people are likely to be by waterways, again, free and highly pertinent. Again, we can remarket to those pages for you as well. And if you work for a transport organisation, you know, TfL, TFGM, Travel South Yorkshire, people will be, as the summer holidays come in, looking at alternative ways of travelling. It's a brilliant time when to intervene and to amplify when people are making travel plans. So there are lots and lots of things that councils and fire, police and other public sector organisations can do to, frankly, radically increase the amplification of these two brilliant, tried, tested and sort of oven ready for amplification campaigns that are ready to go out there. Last year, many councils amplified the Float to Live campaign across their channels. We generated 4.5 million impressions of that campaign. We want to do this and many times more this year. So if you've got the ability to do this, please let us know, and we'll switch it on there for free. In terms of out of home, understanding where your out of home locations are near or on the way to areas where you know are going to be high risk, be they coastal, be they inland. Again, this is something you can do for free. It won't cost you, and yeah, it's in a really powerful location. The RNLI, their campaign is designed to have upweights, weather triggered, so that when it looks like the weekend's going to be warm or weekdays are going to hit over a certain temperature, and the Met Office issues that temperature trigger, the campaign will then be delivered upweight to key target audiences, and also there's the ability there to geo-target areas where you know there is existing behaviour or existing dangerous behaviours of going to the water. Often it's cultural, often it's young people encouraging each other to do that. We know where it's happening, so you can geo-target those areas when the temperature's about to go up and get this message in their minds before they go. Understanding where these audiences are is absolutely essential. So for free, we can let you know, based on your location, what channels are being consumed by which demographics. Based on the feedback with CNN and the RNLI and RoSPA, children and young people, it is Snapchat and YouTube. Those are the places where they make plans and where they're actively or passively consuming messaging. So thoroughly recommend targeting that kind of 13 to 19 age group as much as possible. Well, you really need to be delivering a weather triggered and maybe a summer holiday triggered, and then gentle, always on activity through the summer holidays to young people, particularly on those channels, but also at the same time parents using Meta, advertising around local and national news, and those tactics like remarketing to school term dates pages. That's how we get near 100% reach and multiple frequency of these messages out to people. The weather at the moment isn't likely to climb much beyond those triggers, so there is time to prepare, a rare luxury for public sector communications. So in that time, we can give you all local audience modelling, so you understand the volume of the audience you need to target and an understanding of what you might need to ask for in terms of resources. Get the weather trigger approach approved without dates, so that everything is in place when the Met Office issues that forecast. We can then immediately trigger the campaigns in those areas, and we're preparing a tailored report, so that audience modelling, the approach, the messaging for your local area, essentially a kind of statement of work, which you can share with seniors and get approved early. Drop me a line at that email and we will send one to you probably late next week. We are collaborating with lots of councils, so councils using their own channels for free and those that do pay to amplify. We will measure together, we'll demonstrate what works, and which means we can learn together. Taking all of that data and putting it together at scale will help us understand what we need to do next year to further improve impact. And I would like to say a big thank you to Jack and the Fire Pro team, everyone at Police Communications, APCOM, the LGA for promoting this event, the Communications Leaders Network, also LG Comms for promoting this, and the CNN as well for their networks. And we're going to feed back into those networks all of this learning. So whether you take part or not, there will be learning disseminated through all those networks to share with everybody. I just want to show you something that's happening at the moment, where we have 40 or almost 50 councils collaborating this week ahead of the World Cup around gambling harm. So this approach is very, very achievable and possible, and I would like similar, if not much more, energy applied in the same way to water safety, and see if we can
Thank you. Thanks so much, John Paul. And thank you to all the speakers as well who have jumped on this webinar at really short notice, in the last week. So thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks, John Paul, as well, and Jack earlier for doing that. And I think the number of people on the call show how important it is and how interested people are, in this particular subject. We've got time for questions for any of the speakers, or things that you want to raise. So if anyone wants to put any questions in the Q&A, I can see that people have been adding their comments as we go along, and actually people have been sharing some really useful insights into other things that they've been doing or other things that are going on in their area as well. So thank you very much for sharing those. I think it was Tours in Plymouth. You mentioned about the free bus travel that's being provided for 5 to 15-year-olds throughout August, and therefore potential for increased use of people in buses and use of these messages on those bus routes, which is a really great point. So thank you for raising that. Chris, I also saw you mentioning around the vehicle routes, the major routes, and using the message boards on major routes as well, being able to carry these messages on those as well, which is fantastic. There's obviously some really good collaborative summer campaigns going on that also include things like bike safety, heat wave and heat exhaustion warnings as well, that are feeding some of these messages into those as well. So, there's loads of great work going on out there. So thank you all for sharing those ideas. We've got a question from Karen around engagement with the Scottish local authorities with the RNLI campaign. Ross, is that anything you're able to help us with?
Hello. We've got Scottish water safety teams, and we're very well connected in with Water Safety Scotland. So one of Georgie's colleagues, Carleen McAvoy, leads Water Safety Scotland. In terms of engagement, it's COSLA, isn't it, in Scotland? I'm not sure what the direct relationship is at the moment, but we can take that away and find out. I'm not sure if it might be possible to run something similar like this with them. Georgie, I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts.
As I understand it, the engagement with Scottish local authorities is really strong with Water Safety Scotland. I am confident that they will be aware of various water safety campaigns through the work of Water Safety Scotland. But it's certainly something that I can double check with my Scottish colleagues after this call into next week.
Thanks, Georgie, and thanks, Ross, for that as well. I know certainly there has been, work that's been going on in Scotland with this as well. And of course, you've got the Welsh assets. And I think, Georgie, as well, you've shared your contact details around people who want the Welsh language assets as well for the campaign. So Georgie can help you with those as well. So I'm just monitoring the questions. So we've got a question from Liz about pause ads on-demand TV for the campaigns. Have these been included, and is there any information on how they're performing?
I mean, I can take that from an RNLI perspective and probably speak on George's behalf. We haven't got enough money from RoSPA's perspective to be running stuff on TV. We've got some low-level kind of video on demand type stuff through the RNLI campaign, but again, budgets are not as healthy as we have done in previous years, run full multi-channel campaigns across TV, cinema, but we're just not there at the moment, which again, sort of emphasising JP's point, is why we're so grateful for opportunities like this to try and amplify the message through owned and earned channels as well. The more this is heard and seen on TV and in cinemas, the better. For the float perspective, we know the highest impact is through watching the films, and if you can do that in a cinema environment or on TV or sort of non-skippable stuff, it will definitely have an impact, but we're just a little constrained by budget at the moment.
Thanks, Ross. And JP, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just to add to that, exactly Ross's point, if there was a multi-million-pound budget, those sorts of things would be possible, but we're not in that situation. The major challenge at the moment is that the vast majority of the target audience haven't yet seen the campaign assets. So getting them in a very low cost way to where they are, which is more likely to be YouTube or Snapchat than TV, in terms of reaching all of them at pace and getting those videos out there. That's what the feedback has been. Also, the cost per view and the cost per interaction from those channels is much lower than TV, be it video on demand or being broadcast live. And while cinema is a brilliant medium, you need to get to everybody quickly at the same time. So you're reliant on the number of people who happen to be in the cinema at that time to achieve full reach. So number one objective is everybody in the target market, target audience, seeing it 10, 15 times as soon as possible when the weather starts to warm up.
Thanks, JP. Ross, and you just want to add to that?
Just briefly, I think even if our budgets did get increased dramatically in the next few weeks, I think what we would be looking to really lean into is some of the approach on social, particularly the use of influencers, people that are sort of meeting young people where they are. So the example I gave within our presentation, working with Jacob Ward, and I'll find the link and put it in the chat, that cost us next to nothing as the RNLI, but is our top performing post ever. And so we've got an event organised as an example on the 8th of July in Poole, where we're going to invite down at least a dozen different social media influencers to create content around float and floating and foam float throw for them to put out on their channels. So again, trying to think creatively around how we can get the message in the hands of other people to share on our behalf. And if anyone has got contacts with any kind of high profile influencers or ones with big followings, please do follow up, because we're looking at building the invite list for that at the moment. Could be quite an interesting way of getting the message out ahead of the summer.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, and really today is about that amplification of this. Hopefully, we've got a lot of people on the call today and a big opportunity to be able to amplify what we've got. There is I think it's maybe more of a request from Max from Kentfire that's just gone up, asking about Snapchat and how it's being used by agencies. Max has shared his contact details if anyone wants to get in touch. But JP, would you be able to just maybe build on the Snapchat element that you mentioned in terms of the possible paid amplification?
I think some people think it's a blocker that they don't have an organic presence on Snapchat. It's not. You can buy it relatively easily. In the recent school wars sort of fear contagion, Warwickshire Police bought ads on Snapchat, I think on the Sunday evening and the Monday morning before children were going back to school, and were able to reach all young people. Very low cost, very effective, and help quell things. So there are agencies and organizations using it. We can verify that it is highly effective in terms of reach, frequency, and cost per impression and cost per interaction. So thoroughly recommend. And YouTube Shorts and YouTube, those two are our top recommendation for buying.
Brilliant, thank you. I think I'm just looking at the time, and we've got possibly so I'm just letting the questions come in. No, thank you for everyone's points on this, and it's just interesting as well to see the other methods that are being used and that other people are considering. But I think just to try and make sure that we finish on time, I think that the last thing I would sort of say to wrap up really is that I used to work in fire service comms as well for a number of years, and I know almost certainly what is going on, whether you're in fire service, whether you're in some other agency at the moment. This time of year rolls around and people start knocking on your door in your organisation and saying, what are we doing about water safety? And these moments are always increased when there's a spate of incidents as well, increasingly, urgent, louder calls saying, what are we doing about water safety? And this is an opportunity to do something about that, given what has been happening in the last week or two as well. So we would ask that if people are interested in what you've heard, interested in using these campaigns, please get in touch with us. JP's, made the offer around, we can give you audience information, audience targeting plans, specific to your area. So please do get in touch with us, and please make use of these brilliant campaigns from the RNLI and RoSPA that are there, and hopefully we can all come together and make a real difference. I will just do one more check just to make sure that we haven't got any questions that we're missing. But we, again, really appreciate all these examples you've been sharing, and the different ways that you've been kind of using the campaign and amplifying the message as well. Our contact details have just gone up in the channel, so please do get in touch. Thanks again to everyone, to Jack, to Ross, to Georgie, to Sarah, who have all been able to jump on this call so quickly because of the importance of the message. Really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for everyone who's able to come along, and please do get in touch with us, and we can all make a difference together. Thank you, everyone.